Now?
It is, yeah.
Okay. So I'll just officially start for the recording, but I'm Dr. James Seeberger. I'm an MD PhD. I got my PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology. I did cancer research, studied metastasis. It's back in the 90s. Then I went to medical school, and both of those were in Omaha. And afterwards, I came here for residency in family medicine. My wife is a nurse, and she was like, "Look, you have to be here and here." So I worked with her on homeless populations, and then I've been an emergency room physician for the last 20 years. My bread and butter job. I have a practice here in Wichita called Cognitive Performance and Health. I share with my wife. My wife is a trained neurotherapist, and she's been using equipment for almost a dozen years. She's BCI certified. We have very good types of equipment to measure the brain. We can make the brain work better. I have a friend of mine, Dr. Val Brown. He said, "James," he said, "you can't fix stupid, but you can." So I want to talk about that today, and maybe just give an overarching view of sort of how the environment affects our brain. And because I am a biochemist, I like to talk about molecules, and then I also like to talk about neurophysiology, which is the next layer, and then thought. So when we think about the brain, we think about how it performs. I think of it in three layers. Okay, so the first layer is chemicals, right? Molecules. Oxygen, hydrogen, electrons, protons, membranes, neurotransmitters. And then after that, the next layer is the power and frequencies that it makes. And that's what our brain is. We can measure those. And then the top layer is thought, right? What we think, kind of our operating program. So sometimes we have people who come to us and we measure their molecules, looks good, look at their brain frequencies and coherence values and distributions to look good. And then turns out their operating program is slacker, right? Slacker. Not a great operating program. We have people who come to us who have brain injury. Their molecules are okay. We affect their coherence values and the location of their brain. And then they have a great operating program. Right? They get up and their brain, it might not function but 10%, but the coherence values are very good. We've improved those. They get up in the morning like, "Hey, it's a sunny day. I'm going to go make $1 million." And they do. So know that those are the three layers. So I wanted to kind of get down to the molecular level to understand the power of our body and the cells and what we're really affecting, okay? So when we talk about stress and we talk about chemicals affecting that, we have to have a picture of that. Now, if I were to go to the sun and get an ounce of the sun and bring it down, here is an ounce of the sun. It's really hot. It's a thermonuclear reaction, and it's working because it's very immense. There's tons of hydrogen. It's the pressure, just the gravity is pushing that together, and it's a thermonuclear reaction. And if I could take an ounce of us, right? Us metabolizing into burning oxygen, producing CO2, and compare them ounce to ounce, which do you think would be more powerful? Yes, by how much? It's about 10,000 times. 10,000 times more energy is produced in our processes. Okay? So I'm going to draw just kind of a picture of what that looks like so we can begin to have kind of a molecular level of what this is. Okay? So when we have perturbations, or when we have the other molecules like stress molecules come in, or when we have other molecules like fire retardants, right? What that actually does to perturb the system. But if you just know that the body produces 10,000 times more energy than the sun. It's a very, very efficient system. It's a very, very powerful system, right? For example, if you look at a nuclear power plant, the energy production is 50% efficient. Combustion engine, 25%. Nuclear power's 50%. This process is 75%. 100% is matter, antimatter. So we're on the level. And I'm just going to draw just kind of what happens. Let me come down a little bit. Can you guys see it over this? Okay. Let's see here. Always bring your own marker set, right? Okay. So you guys know that we have oxygen that we're burning, right? And you know in the cells of the body, okay, we have mitochondria, and we have about 50 to 2,000 mitochondria per cell producing the energy. This is the membrane of that mitochondria producing the energy to give us that 10,000 time energy process of the sun. We are passing protons that we're producing here, we're passing them to oxygen, okay? And we're passing them through a membrane and passing them in a very controlled process. And there's protons that are being produced here, and they're binding, they're coming up here, and they're binding to oxygen, okay? And you guys have all had high school chemistry, right? And you know what stoichiometry is. And so this is a hydrogen, and this is oxygen. And it combined in 4 different ways. H, OH is 1. O, H2 is 1, hydrogen peroxide. 3. And the most famous one is water, H2O. Okay? Those are the 3 ways that hydrogen can bond. And it's doing this about 4,999 times out of 5,000. It's a lot. Pretty efficient. And I'm drawing this molecule right here, and it looks like a little circle. But if you were to go down electron microscope and look at this, this is complex 1 of the electron transport chain for oxidative phosphorylation. And you were to look at this, this would be a giant molecule actually composed of like tons of subunits, about 50 subunits. It's a huge thing, and it's taking a proton and it's carefully moving it up and binding it with oxygen. It's actually called quantum tunneling is the actual name of this. Very fascinating. And this right here can be changed so that when you have cortisol over here, which is what you produce when you have stress, and it goes into the cell and it binds to a membrane, it comes all the way down, it will begin to perturb this system. So instead of getting like this 1 in 5,000 time, you get like 10 in 5,000. You produce more OH. Okay? Now, this right here is passing so many hydrogen that it's 10,000 times more hydrogen on this side than that side. It's a high voltage power line. 10,000 volts. This is called the potential difference. We kind of draw it like that. And that's where we're getting our energy. It's a huge amount of energy. As an interesting aside, if you put this whole process in an electric field, a magnetic field, and orient the spins of the binding electrons, you'll change the efficiency of this reaction. Pretty amazing, right? Because one of the things that we do in our office is we use magnetic fields, and we're changing the power production, efficiency of production. Now, everybody's heard of inflammation, right? Right? Everybody's heard of inflammation. These right here are the primary molecules of inflammation. These control the oxidative state. And in particular, this OH is very, very important. Now, do you guys remember like pure sodium, right? It's put in oil and meets air, right? That's because this is very, very reactive. And it forms a chain reaction called a peroxidation reaction that will break the membrane and lead to a chain reaction involving 500,000 molecules. Very detrimental. So we are always producing some because we're not 100% efficient in our reactions. We're very controlled, but I want you to see what the primary messengers of inflammation are. I want you to see the secondary messengers right here that they produce. Because when you have stress, cortisol comes down, it manipulates this quantum tunneling to produce more. And so now we're running into this danger. Now, these all have different things, or different signaling molecules and targets. These two are highly reactive and do this. This one right here, hydrogen peroxide, will signal to make more mitochondria. Kind of interesting. It's like I know this is inefficient, you're going to destroy some of this, but I'm going to make some more. Pretty interesting. Now this guy here is really important because it does something and connects to another molecule called DNA. You guys didn't know on a Saturday morning you're going to have a biochemistry lecture, right? But I just want to draw the molecules out here so you're like, oh, that's why stress is bad. Oh, this is why bromotor fire return is bad. Oh, this is why I've got to control this stuff. And I want you to understand the importance of oxidation because when it comes to breathing, you're going to control this process, right? So I just draw a picture because I don't have 6 hours. I only have 30 minutes. I got to tie it together. And I'm a biochemist. I told you I was. I'm a nerd, right? So I'll burn a Saturday, like clean out the garage. Like, no, I got to figure this out. So this binds the DNA methyltransferase. Like what? Now we're getting methyl. That's all the more organic chemistry I'll get into. Okay, who knows what a methyl molecule is? Does anybody? Methyl in organic chemistry is this guy. It's CH3. That's what a methyl is. Okay? And what I'm showing you is when all this is going on, it's producing these molecules. Some of them are detrimental. This is the one that we normally produce. But this is a baddie. But it also couples to this enzyme to produce this methylation, which occurs, okay, on DNA. Now, who knows what DNA is? One person? You guys know what DNA? 2 people? DNA. Everybody knows. The 20th century is the century of DNA. Discovery and manipulation of DNA. We're kind of like, oh, kind of old hat. DNA is, and we have a cell, we all have some chromosomes. Who's here heard of chromosomes? Chromosomes, okay? This is the genetic markers of what makes us who we are, right? We inherit DNA, and it causes the expression of genes. Okay, we show this here, which is the proteins that then make us us. But we have a problem. And the problem is this here is the same DNA for me when I was a child. But I'm not a child. I'm becoming a sniffly older man, whiter hair. So I got to understand how this DNA that made me a child, made me a young man, making me an older man. Okay? Because this understanding of this DNA is what's going to lead to, cancer, right? Because I got to tie in stress and all these molecules to cancer. Okay? I have to give an explanation of why our environment or how our environment begins to cause the diseases that we have. Okay? So I'm just drawing all the way over here, going across, a mile chain. And so what happens here is that when we have a free radical production, we will always have some, when it's perturbed, when we have a stressful life, or when it's perturbed when we have the presence of a molecule like brominated fire retardant, it's going to perturb this problem, and perturbation is going to cause more of this, which is cause more of the DNA methyltransferase, which is going to cause more methylation. These markers are going to show up on our DNA, and it's going to affect our genes and how they're expressed.
Would this same process, would that be an explanation for people who are obviously firefighters in the military, but higher cortisol? Would this also tie into possibly an explanation for low testosterone?
It could, because when we have a perturbation in this process, we have a lot of free radicals that are produced, then we don't have functioning mitochondria. And mitochondria make our hormone. Okay? So we're going to wind up, a lot of people are studying mitochondria, and this is the process that's going on in mitochondria. They're studying a lot of this process to understand our disease state. And it will get us to low testosterone. Okay? Because it's going to affect the oxidation state. What's happening, this is up here is the mitochondrial membrane. What you have down here is mitochondria DNA, which is its own little genome of about 30,000 base pair that is producing the proteins on a minute-to-minute basis. So we can adjust our energy production and our free radical production by how we bring in oxygen in our environment. We're changing that quickly. We're changing on a millisecond level. We're changing on a minute-to-minute level. Okay? So when we have this free radical production, we start to mark both our mitochondria DNA and our nuclear DNA. Now, I would argue mitochondria DNA are more important because you can take a cancer cell with mitochondria, the cancer mitochondria, and put them in a normal cell, and you get cancer. You can take mitochondria from a person with Alzheimer's and put those mitochondria in a normal cell, and you get a demented cell. So this process right here is the original perturbation. We have to be careful because this is combining and it's adding up, and we're marking ourselves. First our mitochondria, and then our nuclear DNA, and it's affecting the genes that are expressed. This change, then, it's a cancer. Okay? It establishes the change that we have in ourselves. You have to say, I have a stressful life. How do I change as a person to be able to deal with that stress that I'm dealing with? You have to have a mechanism of the environment affecting us to change us in order to be in that environment. Right? So this is how you get the effects here into a semi-permanent fashion. And when you have molecules, brominated fire retardants, or other fire retardants, what's a fire retardant? Does anybody know what just in general, what a fire retardant looks like? How they work? The fire retardant is a molecule, let me draw it just in general. It has a benzene ring, and I clearly admit this is organic chemistry at this point, but what this is, this benzene rings, these are molecules that accept electrons and then distribute the energy. So it collects them and holds them, and that's what heat is. It's what heat and fire produce. So you need to be able to store that energy. Now, if this molecule intercalates into the membrane and begins to collapse or change or affect this process of OH production or the production of power here, which is very, 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 very powerful, this is high voltage, you're going to have changes here. And you're going to have changes here, and you have changes here. Right? So we have a lot of molecules that absorb heat and don't break down because of this, that are fat soluble, say aliphatic, that go into this lipid membrane, and they're right there. Okay? Now, where does the power of our brain come from? This. This is how it comes. It's where it's produced, right? And it does it in spades. Like 95% of our brain power is this way. All right? So I want you to have an image of the power that our bodies produce, how it does it, what its primary signaling molecules are, what they wind up doing, changing methylation effects on DNA that then permanently affect us, that lead to, in time, cancer. And these are cumulative. So you can have some molecules down here that you're exposed to, and you can have stress that does this, and you have a lot more. They all come to the same pot, or they all funnel down to this, right? And what I would tell you is I kind of struggle to quantitate this, but I say there's only so much room. So if you have a lot of stress, you're going to have this. If you have some stress and a lot of chemical exposure, you're going to have this. But you can see that they're additive. So what I would tell you is somebody who has a lot of stress and then has a lot of chemical exposure, they're really in spades going to have this trouble. Okay? And they're going to change, the mitochondria are going to change, and their function, which one of them is to produce testosterone and other hormones, that'll be changed. And the power production in the brain will be changed. The behavior will be changed. Okay, so you only have so much room to produce this. If you use it in chemical exposure, you can't handle stress. If you use it in stress, okay, you have so much chemical exposure. It's additive. And there's always this, medical world, that person's nuts. That person's just like, yeah, it's because of this. There's a great book, in Our Stolen Future, written some 30 years ago. And there's a chapter, it's very fascinating. And what they did is they took mice, and they put them in a maze, and they put an owl over that maze, and to create fear, stress. And they didn't run that maze as well. Okay? They took same mice, and they gave them chemical exposure. And they didn't do as well in that maze. Then they did owl plus chemicals, and they really did not do as well. Okay? So it was synergistic. That effect was synergistic. Let me go here. Stop. So it really pans out, all right? Now, groups of people have high exposure and high stress. What do I think will happen? A lot of this, a lot of this. All right? So, this is a basic this is the fundamental basis processes that are going on. Okay? Any questions? Am I too loud? I get so excited. OH, DNA methyltransferase 3, so awesome. All right, so that's a basic process there of how we can integrate stress and chemical exposure in order to understand what happens to us epigenetically. And, I'll say this about RFK Jr. He's right. He's right. Right? And now, there is a medicine that you can take to remove the brominated fire retardants and the PFAS chemicals, this whole class of chemicals. It's called cholestyramine, FDA-approved drug. There's one paper that just came out in Sweden. They had farmers that had biosludge distributed on their land. They thought that was a good idea for fertilizer, but they had a lot of concentrated chemical waste. We have about 2 million acres in this country with that problem out of like 900 million. Still a problem if you're a farmer. But there's a medicine that's been shown to remove that. Okay, I use it pretty regularly in my office, FDA approved, lowers triglycerides, lower hemoglobin A1C, affects cholesterol. it makes me wonder if these chemicals cause that. Right? Makes me wonder. So, just curious about that. All right. So I'm about interventions, okay? And what I tell people is I'm a death fighter, okay? Like this. That's how I fight death. Write things, tell people to do things, talk about things. And I saw this story of special ops, right? And they go in, they get the guy, no shot fired. Yeah. We got him. It's out. Nobody's hurt. Great. So I kind of like things not happening, right? So I'm a doctor. I see people in accidents all the time. I see bad disease. I like people being stable, doing well. They're 80 years old. They're going on a hike. Okay, so cholestyramines, chemical, we actually need like the federal government to pay or use some of its money. I'm sort of a farmer type, like use what you have, like redistribute the money that it's spending in a wasteful way and spend it on detoxification studies. I think we should do that. Right, I think the NIH should spend some time doing that. So we had some more data on this, okay? That's a whole field. Detoxification is a whole field that the naturopaths have pioneered. It's one of their pillars of health. And I think it's a critical component. There's lots of toxins that you can go out and there's books on detoxification, all right? And the compounds that we're talking about, this one works. All right, let's do the next intervention. Let's talk about breathing. All right? Because remember how I said the stress is synergistic with chemical exposure and the perturbation of the mitochondria, right? Breathing is super critical, right? Because we are dealing with a high energy process, right? 10,000 volts at the membrane, 10,000 times more efficient, or 10,000 times hotter than the sun. Huge. We don't feel that heat, by the way, because we control it so well and because we operate at the optimum temperature for enzyme reactions. And because we actually are using, evolutionarily wise, we're using some of that OH to define our ecological niche of how old we'll be, okay? So the detriment of stress has a value, okay? But let's talk about stress, okay? Who has a definition of stress?
Not life.
What's that?
Not life.
Okay. So one definition is the urgent need, desire, want to choke the living shit out of somebody who desperately needs it, right? And you can't. You're like, no. So that's one definition of stress. But stress actually, Selye in the middle of the 20th century, he did a stress curve, and it looks like this. We actually have an optimum amount. If we don't have enough cortisol, we're down here. We don't perform well physiologically. If we have too much, our performance drops off. But we do have an optimum level of stress, okay? We actually need some. Some people need more than others. I would argue, looking at my brain, I'm psychodynamically understimulated. So I seek stressful situations because I'm here. I seek this. I'm here, see here. Just understand. Right? There's a point at which I'm like, I'm coming over here. I got 3 people dying. I don't like it. Please go faster. Okay, and I change my voice. I'll come back here. Okay, do this. So this is a stress curve, and it's the amount of cortisol to our performance. Okay, so we know that we need some. Okay, so who has heard of breathing and breathing work? Everybody. What do you guys know about it? Stress management. Okay, so what do we teach in breathing for stress management? Box breathing. Okay, and what's that? Okay. So is it fair to say nobody here knows the physiology of where that's coming from? Why breathing is so important? All right, I'm gonna draw this picture for you. I want you to understand it. Some of the equipment some of you guys are wearing clearly impacts it. Okay, the military and the police forces wear heavy vests, and it's worsening their breathing. It's creating bad breathing. It's creating a bad physiological state, right? Some of the things that are happening by the police forces, it's not a training problem, it's not racism, I would say. Some of it's equipment, just an equipment problem. So I'm just going to explain breathing and the physiology so you know how it works. And box breathing is absolutely correct. How many of you read this book by James Nestor, Breathe? Right? There's like five books in the Chinese medical literature about breathing. And I heard this lecture from a psychiatrist from Pakistan, and he was practicing in New York, and he believes that for each mental illness, there's a breathing prescription. There's a correct rate of breathing for each of those mental illnesses. All right? So what I would say is the one I'm going to teach you is important for anxiety. Okay? So let's talk about breathing. So if you want, I got interested in stress because I have to have a high-performance life, right? I'm taking care of people, and I go home, my wife and kids taking care of people, and then people calling me, there's just stress all over the place. Look, where do I go to stress? Stress. Who teaches about stress? The Association of Applied Psychophysiology. The Association of Applied Psychophysiology is where you go. And these guys are sort of, they're older than me, but I'm approaching their age. They're middle-aged and older professors in sort of tweed suits. And you go there for 2 days, and you hear a lecture on breathing. And they're going to fly through it. They're like, look, we only have so much time. And you're like, breathing? Really? You just go, that's breathing, right? Slow down. And they draw all these diagrams, they measure, and they're really physiologists. And so they talk about breathing and they measure breathing, and breathing is very critical because it's controlling this oxygen process, right? And so what I want to show you is I'm going to just show you where you can control breathing. So here is the lungs, right? And here's the diaphragm, right? And that's looking at it this way. If you look at it over here, here's the lungs, and here's the diaphragm. It goes up, and then it goes down like this. And it comes out, right? So I want you to take your left hand and put it right here, right underneath your chest, right where your abdomen meets your chest, and I'm going to teach you how to breathe in, okay? I want you to imagine that air is coming in through your mouth and going through a tube to a lever that pushes this out when you breathe in, like this. And then when you breathe out, breathe in through your nose. One more time. Real slow, through your nose. Hold it, bear down a little bit. Slowly exhale. About 6 inches. That's taking a breath. That's taking breath. Now, it's not about the amount of oxygen you're breathing in. Okay? That's the least part of it. It's really about the movement of your diaphragm. Here, in here. That diaphragm, okay, has buried inside of it parasympathetic nerve firing. Okay, parasympathetic nerves are embedded in the diaphragm. And they send a signal up here to your carotid body. Okay? And parasympathetic is the calming part. It's the calming part of your autonomic nervous system. Okay? And it comes up here and it sends a signal here to your carotid body that sends a signal. There's all parasympathetic firing. Sends a signal down to your heart. Slows your heart down. It'll drop your blood pressure about 20 millimeters of mercury, usually. This is the primary intervention for hypertension. So what I do is I have patients take their blood pressure. I have them breathe for 5 minutes in a box-like fashion. Breathe in, like I showed you. Breathe in over 3, hold it for 3, exhale for 3. It's about 9 seconds, 10 seconds, about 6 breaths per minute. And you need to optimize the rate. If you're a tall person, it might be 5 breaths per minute. If you're a short person, a little kid, it might be 8 or 9 breaths per minute. We're like metronomes. Big person, boom, boom. Little person, boop, 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 boop. So there's an optimal rate of breathing, okay? And there's an optimal way of breathing. And that fires the parasympathetic that goes to the carotid body up here. It sends a signal to the heart, slows the heart down. Parasympathetic control. Okay, now the next part is that I ran out of room, but this signal goes to the brain, okay? I'll draw a picture of the brain like this. Here's a carotid body's here. It sends a signal to the nucleus, tractus alteris. Send it over here, here, here. Locus coeruleus. These are all little parts in the brain about as big as a pen. This controls the sympathetic nervous system. This controls the amygdala and fear. And this controls the paraventricular median, which controls blood pressure. Yeah, calming. Calming. I observed this in the emergency room. Things are falling to crap. I'm fighting death like crazy, right? The nurses are like, hey, what's going on? Hey, over room 7, there's a crying kid. They start talking. What's happening? When they talk, they breathe in. They calm themselves. They're self-calming. They're communicating. I don't interrupt that. I direct it. Talk about room 8. Go get the medicine over there. So right here, look at this. This is fear. Right in the middle of the limbic system. Okay? So I'm going to go back to equipment and equipment failure in this country, in the military. Okay? You're all these guys are wearing heavy vests. What happens? Can't breathe. What happens if you breathe like that? The opposite. And what happens here in the brain is the brain hears all this signal. And when you breathe too fast, you blow out your carbon dioxide and your blood becomes alkalotic, the pH increases, and the oxygen will not unload from the hemoglobin. Okay? So you can look at this. There's an MRI image or a PET scan of somebody who's hyperventilating in 1 minute. And there's no metabolism of glucose going on in the brain because there's oxygen. The oxygen's there, stuck. Oh, if they have enough, right? All the handicapped medical people, they measure the oxygen. It's 99%. You have enough oxygen. Stop breathing so fast. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not unloaded off of the hemoglobin. That's why it's high. And the tissue is actually starving. Tissue is starving. You go, lots of oxygen. You've blown out all the carbon dioxide. You pass out. Can't think. Can't move. So who is at these conferences on stress management? for the Association of Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback. Who is there? Who's in the audience? I'm the only doctor. I'm a couple doctors at this point, a couple nurses, a quarter of the military people, right? Then there'll be psychologists, good chunk, learn about this. And then you have, I call them the Canadian tea drinkers. Oh yeah, I train Olympic athletes, right? And they're doing this too, right? So they're training athletes to breathe correctly because they know that controlling the rate will control the pH, will control oxygen unloading, will control this super energetic process. So the way you breathe is critical. And it's not because of oxygen and having it, it's because the rate controls the pH and the oxygen unloading. Okay? And that's critical. See, when you're in a stressful situation, when you start to overbreathe, and the brain here produces a vagal signal, right? Which is an inhibitory signal. This is all inhibition. It goes to the vocal cords, goes to the heart, goes down to 200 other areas. This is a vagal stimulation. The vagal stimulation goes way down in a hyperventilating person. And then what do we hear? We hear this, oh yeah, that's freaking out. The pitch of the voice goes higher. Oh my God, that building got burn up. Right? So you can just use your ears. It's telling us this fundamental thing about what's happening. And you need to go breathe. So it's very fascinating, this control of breathing and this control of oxygen loading. And if you can, and what you know, why do the Chinese write 5 books on this? Right? Like, oh, we wrote a bestseller a couple years ago. And the reason is our brain is working in the background on a lot of things all the time. Like I'm talking to you, I'm walking around, trying to be interactive, try to teach you some things. And I'm breathing. But now let's say I was in some water. And I was like, up, hold your breath. You have to be able to control your breathing. So the breathing is the connection of your unconscious with your conscious. You immediately can control it. And so you begin to feel your breathing. If you pay attention to it, you have lots of insight into your unconscious state. Really critical.
We've got just about 10 more minutes before we switch over. And I know this is really important, and we'll continue to do more of them. But what are some protocols that you think we could do if we're high stress, high exposure? The breathing one is huge, but how much does diet, sleep, and like heat and cold therapy play into all this? Some practical things that we can take away and start tomorrow.
Okay. So you guys get this. Pretty critical, right? Pretty critical. When we train the brain in our office, half of the gain will be from breathing correctly, and we'll teach breathing, okay? How did I know that we were having trouble with our equipment? We were trying to train a police officer for her anxiety. It's nothing, I have no surprise, I mean, like, you know, what do we see sometimes? Horribleness, right? Things we can't control. Right? What we can't control is what leads to our stress. This we can control. She was wearing this tight vest. We were looking at her brainwaves, making no progress. I said, officer, can you take off your vest? Sure, she did. Start training. Saw on the screen. Corrected numbers. Corrected numbers. We need about 2 inches more in our vests and our equipment. It's a big problem. So the first is being aware. Okay? Being aware of what, this is driving, this is how we become aware of our stress. All right. Talk about, and I think it's fair to say I need more time than 40 minutes, but let's talk about sleep. Okay? Sleep is restorative. All right? And I haven't spent a lot of time on the vagus nerve, but it's really critical. And it's a summation, it's sort of this lower part of the brain. It's had an evolution over 270 million years. And when this guy is not working well, it's not slept, or when we drink alcohol, or when we have a lot of chemical exposure, or we don't have sufficient food, and this guy will not work well. And that means there's less stimulation coming down, our heart rates and blood pressures go up. That's where that comes. That's a basic mechanism of hypertension, just chronic stress. And we're so smart as doctors, like, we'll use a beta blocker. We'll block the receptor of adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine. We'll block it so your body doesn't feel it as much. And we think we're so smart. And we are, because it inhibits the long-term diseases that we can get from that. But I would argue we ought to be doing breathing work to train this process. If we train 5 minutes a day for a total of 4 hours in general, right? That's how these Canadian figure skating coaches are getting really great performance, right? They're doing training work twice a day, 15 minutes, and this trains this process of correct breathing. It's important to feel it, right? That's why I want you to put your hand there and feel your diaphragm move out, okay? I heard this story that special ops, they're like, we're spending $1 million in all this, and half the guys wash out. Is there any way that we can see if there's a way to not have half of our force that we're training wash out? And they got some psychologists, says, whatever you need. Papers, pencils, tests, time, whatever you need. And they said, nope, we just need 15 minutes. And what they did is they measured this effect, and this is something that you guys can adopt, and we're talking about it, and the military is using it. But when you have good vagal nerve stimulation and you have good breathing, you can measure this, the effect of your breathing on your heart rate and the variability of your heart rate. And when you have good breathing and good stimulation with good vagal nerve stimulation, there's direct components and other direct components. There's multiple components that go into the heart rate. When you have good heart rate variability, you have good performance. And when you lose heart rate variability, you have bad performance. So Major League Baseball, they take these multi-million-dollar players and they measure their heart rate variability so that they can see what it looks like on Monday morning. And they come out and they're like, what the hell did you do? Because your variability is horrible. You have to go home and rest. And we paid you $120 million. You can't do that. I'm like, well, I just had 2 drinks on Friday. I'm like, well, we see, right? So heart rate variability measurement is something that you can adopt in order to begin to get measurements on the different effects of your lifestyle. So alcohol and poor sleep and bad diet and sugar worsen this. Reactive food worsens it. And the opposite, good food, good sleep, exercise, a nap, improves it. And I would say that if you were to, if you were in charge of police forces or military services or other stress professions, you just have a measurement. And you would just objectively look at it and go, hey man, I want the good heart rate variability people to be on my force today. I'm going to take the top 50%. The rest of you guys, 3/4 pay. You're messing up. But at the same time, you could go to them and go, hey, you were at that shooting or you were at that fire. You had this thing happen to your head. You need correction for that. Not alcohol, sleep, N-acetylcysteine, right? So I showed you. We'll go back to the very first image, right? It's like, look, this is a hugely oxidative process. produces it's perturbed. When it's perturbed, we have this OH. Extinguish it. Glutathione peroxidase is an enzyme. It takes methionine, special type of methionine, selenomethionine, selenium. Let's measure. Let's improve that process to extinguish that perturbation that you have that's leading to these long-term processes. And we should see an improvement, heart rate variability right away, because we're going to improve this guy. So those are some things.
Yeah.
Any questions? Not.
So at the time of high stress, we'll say a cop with a
Yeah.
bad guy downrange.
Yeah.
They have to have all their senses about, so on and so forth. How do they, so if they're doing box breathing and controlling their heart rate and all that stuff, do those mechanisms for the breathing also inhibit some of the good things from the sympathetic nervous system?
So,
Like the heightened alertness and all that stuff?
So what I would tell you is I don't know. It's a good question. We clearly live on this, right? Like I'm down here and then 10 people come in. I'm like, oh, I'm over here, right? And I'm like, it's so slow, so bored. Time's going so slow. You know, and I hear this from military people like, I'm really only awake when I'm under fire. I'm like, yeah, you're over here and then you're here. You're in the right job. You're doing the right thing. People who are here, I see plenty of doctors go, I hate the emergency room. I hate it. There's some sort of, and they might die. I'm like, not the right place for you. You're over here. Now you're over here. You need to go over here, right? So what I would tell you is training, right? So if you have a police officer who goes to the gym, who slept well, is not drinking alcohol, he's not wearing equipment that constricts his breathing, right? So he can actually breathe correctly. He'll have sympathetic, and then he'll come here and not here, right? He'll be in the right place, right? But you can see, there's always a point where you can be overwhelmed, right? I'm in the emergency room, you have a child not breathing, I'm here. I am there. And I know that I'm there. And I'm thinking calmly. I'm going through, I've practiced. And when it's all done, we save that child's life. They get in a helicopter. Everything's good. I'll come here. And this is what I feel. I am so tired. I'm done. And everybody, that's a high valence. Valence is the word that we use for a psychodynamic quality that we can measure in the EEG, and a tremendous signal, and I'll be like, I'm done. And what's happened is I've had so much sympathetic firing like this that I have actual lactic acid in my body, and I'm worn out. And that's where that is. And people who have chronic fatigue, they feel like that all the time. And a lot of chronic fatigue people have had dramatic things happen to them, and they just have that as their sort of their norm. They need treatment over here, right? So we can measure that. When you have a lot of activity happen in the brain, okay? You have a lot of activity happen in the brain. Here's looking down. So we're in psychophysiology world. We look down, not up. That's medical world. But in psychophysiology world, this is left, this is right. And we can put sensors right there. That's what my wife does. I've looked at these. We put sensors here, and right here is where the amygdala is, and we can see the sensor go, lots of activity. And that's fear. That's learned fear, right? But you put me in a room, put this on here, go, let's talk about what happened, a dramatic case. You'll get this with me. I can calm that with breathing, because I know I'll feel I'm not breathing. Right? I can breathe, begin to talk. That's what I do. It's what most people do. But I can also, my wife can also train that from this to calm with neurofeedback. And then we can train the brain so we're calm again. Right? So I would argue it's training.
Do you have any quick opinions on nicotine and creatine?
Not caffeine. So I'm a tea bro too, because what did Tim Ferriss says? American culture is 2 pots of coffee for 18 hours and then 4 beer for 6 hours, right? So, I understand nicotine. I remember hearing the lecture in medical school on nicotine. I went up to the speaker afterwards and I said, "Can I have some?" And he was like, "That's not funny," and no. I'm like, okay, right? And I get it. The problem with nicotine is it stabilizes receptor interactions. The nicotine receptor stabilization is 30 times more powerful with alcohol. That's why people smoke and drink. And both of those are bad. And what I would argue is the problem with nicotine is people are now able to administer more of the H2O2. And that's what happens with really extreme exercise and you have lactic acid. And so the response from that is to make more muscle. It's a molecule to make more mitochondria, make more muscle. So you can put yourself in certain health conditions, sort of the extreme over here, to move your response. Any other questions?
Well, I got a bunch.
Sure, yeah. I said 1 hour, 2 hours, 2 hours. I mean, I wasn't kidding, right?
Yeah, so what we'll do is, if you hang around until after the end of Rick's portion, there's actually a little bit of a buffer between here and when we go into the pool, so you can ask him anything you'd like. So, thanks.
You're welcome.
James?
Thank you, guys.
And so now I really wanted to bring up someone who has been there, done that, and talk about some practical application from it. We've got Rick here from California. So Rick will give you a little bit of his background. He was Special Operations Marine, and now does a lot of different things, but really focuses on health and wellness and ironically breathing.
Yay!
So, Rick, can you join me down here for a second?
I was hoping I didn't have to speak.
Yeah, I know. You were like, keep going. 2 hours, 2 hours. So I'll let Rick kind of give a little bit about his background and why we're here today, but I thought specifically for the military firefighters in the room, talk about been there and done that in practical application. This is Rick. So Rick, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I'll let you hold that too.
What is this?
It's a microphone that you can speak into. Or you don't have to.
There's a clip or a magnetic thing.
I'm not you have to forgive me. I'm not a good public speaker, so I'm going to start saying my quirks here a little bit. First, thank you guys for your time. And my name is Rick. I'm coming from California. I've been here before. I met a couple of you at the last Deep in Fitness course that we were in, and now I'm back to do it again. Hopefully, everybody is ready for round 2. Background-wise, I grew up in Haiti, which is a pretty messed up place. And it was the first time ever seeing a U.S. Marine during a coup d'etat that was happening to remove the first president there. And I was like, I want to be one of those guys. And fast forward to the future, I joined the military, went to the Marine Corps, and ended up in the Special Operations community. And speaking to your point, Doctor, is that the stress factor in that community is extremely high, whether you're going to selection, after selection, because of the culture there. And the main thing I enjoyed about it is that you live and die there by your reputation, what you can accomplish, how you deal with stress, how you manage a high operational tempo. And I do know there's a lot of firefighters here. I'm friends with a lot of firefighters, and I look at their tempo, specifically if there's a fire, house is collapsing, like anything that's an emergency. You're expected to go from that rest and digest state to fully operational, where you're exposed to a stressful stimulus for an extended period of time. And the main thing I do here at Deep in Fitness is, funny enough, that my teammate that basically kept me alive as I got shot through and through the neck, he started Deep in Fitness as a response to dealing with those stressors. What are some of the things that he did to help him throughout that situation? And when we broke it down to, he was like, dude, I was just focused on breathing to maintain top-down cognitive control. So that's why we started kind of going through the process of creating Deep in Fitness. And he's a water baby. He loves being in the water. Me, for obvious reasons, did not grow up swimming. Let's see. Yeah, that's one. I did not grow up swimming, but it's a skill I acquired later on in life, and as a response to being in therapy for so long to recover to be able to use my extremities properly, I jumped into deep end fitness. Water offered me quite a bit, and so I'm here hoping to share a lot of this with you guys today too. One of the things I know we talked about box breathing. It's a very, very useful tool to manage stress. There are others that I like to use too, and that one has a kind of triangle breathing, but the main focus on it is extending that exhale. Because the longer you take to exhale, it sends a signal to the vagus nerve and it signals the rest of your body to put you into that rest and digest, so that parasympathetic response mode. So when you're in a stressful environment, dealing with a fire, first things that we notice that tends to go is a person's breathing. Your breathing gets out of whack, everything starts to fall apart afterwards. And when it comes to firefighters, I tend to measure it by what's left in your tank. And if you start breathing sporadically, you tend to drain your tank. But when you start learning how to take the time to extend that exhale, sending that signal to your vagus nerve, activating that parasympathetic response, it allows your body to stay in that parasympathetic response for a longer period of time. How that translates into an operational setting is you can do more or the same amount of work for a longer period before your body starts experiencing that molecular or even physical degradation. I'm not saying that you can do this for hours and hours on end. You're going to have that natural degradation that happens. But being able to control your breathing, as the doctor was talking about, having the mechanism that you can use to control how your body responds to certain stimuli is your breathing. Being able to consciously focus on your breath, and the rest tends to fall into place. It'll keep you in an operational setting or in a performative manner for an extended period of time. So for us, what that meant is the firefight where I zigged when I should have zagged and ended up taking a bullet. It lasted 48 hours. So the majority of us were supposed to be on high alert, fully operational, being able to respond to stressors, being able to respond to firefights, and we won't know when we're able to sleep or not. Yes, that exhaustion tends to happen, but the main thing is we did have a breath coach prior to. At first, you're like, dude, we don't need this crap. We need to work out. We need to take protein. My mentor and team chief will always grab my arm and shake it and be like, dude, you're 140 pounds. You need to get a little bit bigger. We didn't really take the whole breathing thing seriously until we got into that situation. And that's when we started realizing that how important it is for performance and longevity in performance when it comes to your breathing. The faster you breathe, start increasing that heart rate. Your body's gonna respond because it's gonna need to rest at some point. That's where that physical and mental exhaustion falls into place. And here at Deep in Fitness, we're gonna get in the water here in a little bit. That's where we tend to create some of these situations. I'm not gonna take you and all right, man, I'm gonna start shooting at you, see how you respond. But we can get you into we can allow a bit of a stressor when we're in the water. If you're not so comfortable with it, if you're not so comfortable with how your body will respond with being underwater for an extended period of time, and some of the workouts that we are going to do today. CO2 tolerance with built-in mechanisms where you can rest and breathe as you see fit, but you have to try your best to maintain a decent performance marker. And I say start at max effort, give it all you got, and see how long it takes you to start degrading. And then when you feel that degradation happen, how long can you maintain it before it goes down to the next level and down to the next level, and to the point where it's like you're exhausted, you can still move, but like it's like you're dragging yourself across the pool. So we're gonna get exposed to some of this stimuli today. If you guys want to hear a little story of how I got shot, it was just like terrible. But what's important is the process. Remembering the breath mechanisms, like the breathing patterns. Some guys use box breathing, some were focusing more on triangle breathing. And I tend to use it myself, just because when I'm at home, before I go to the gym, even while I'm working out, I take a couple seconds to work on that breathing pattern so I can see just how far I can go with it too. Something that the doctor brought up that's very important is the training. You don't just wake up one day like, oh crap, I'm stressed out, I'm just gonna do it right away. If you take the time to practice it, even if you're not stressed out, it allows your body to acclimate to it. As one thing I came to learn, I know a psychologist told me that too, is that the body is extremely adept at keeping itself alive. Your body's extremely adept at survival, so it will adjust to certain stimuli to make it so that you can perform, do your duty, whatever the case is. But your body is also very adept at remembering stressors and remembering trauma. So if you don't have that training where you can counterbalance that, you're typically, I'm not saying you, typically a human being, when it comes to stressors, once you reach that marker, you reach it faster and faster and faster. So start working on that training, working on your breath work allows you that buffer where you get faced with a stressful situation. It's easier for you to maintain top-down cognitive control because you already know, like, okay, I know how to start breathing. That the main thing I need to do is work on breathing first. Yeah. Any questions? Any questions at all? You can ask me whatever you want. Damn. Yes.
You have to go into detail, but give us just a brief overview of like where you served and kind of what your military career looked like.
Started off in Ninth Com as a communications guy. I didn't really. I was pretty young at 16 years old. My mom did not want to sign if I said I was going to infantry, so I had to lie to her and beg my recruiter to say, "Hey, I'm going to go here." But my whole goal was to go to infantry. But unfortunately, I ended up in communications, which was awesome because it gave me a whole different skill set that was valued. But for me, I thought it was boring as hell. Military-wise, I had a blast. Deployed a few times. Went to a deployment to the Philippines when they were starting to experience a lot of terrorist attack with the more Islamic Liberation Front. Coming back from there, I decided to go to a selection program, which for those of you guys that are going to some selection programs or whatever, terrible place to learn how to swim. Horrible place to learn how to swim. But through just enough banging my head against the wall, and having that community in terms of our team was small enough that everybody kind of took care of one another. Passed and ended up in Afghanistan afterwards, and that was my favorite deployment because it's a different environment, and it's also the main thing is that okay, this is what I trained for. All right, working with partner forces, working with different forces, but also working in an austere environment because high functioning guys we like to look for, or guys and gals we like to look for stressful environments because if we're not there, we're down here where it's like, okay, man, this is stupid, this is boring, or I'm overexhausted because we didn't have access to things like that. We didn't really have access to psychologists and also doctors that are well versed in this. It was more like go, go, go. Afterwards, my career kind of took a back shift after getting injured because it took me about 2 years to learn how to walk properly, to use my extremities. Even now, I still have a lot of things that I have to keep in mind. Because sometimes I won't. Sometimes all my nerves, there's a lot of damage to them, so I won't get a lot of messages coming from the top to bottom. So I want to do something, but the extremities will want to do something different. So those are like some of the things that you can think about in terms of damage. But afterwards, I separated from the military, joined up with Deep in Fitness, which I've been with them ever since the last 5 years, and it's been a lot of fun. Got to travel quite a bit. Get to meet a myriad of awesome people, like different points of view, different backgrounds, and so on. And I focus more on training when it comes to Deep in Fitness, but now my path kind of changed a little bit to development of different licensees, different locations. That's why I'm here, and I'm back here thanks to Steven. Something that I just got back from. I just went to Haiti on a contract, and what we were talking about, the vests and everything was fascinating. That's why I was kind of laughing back there if you didn't see me, because the partner forces that I got to work with in Haiti, every single one of them have the exact same issue. It's like they understand the situation because they live there, but when it comes to performance of their duties, they crash out quickly because all the gear, their vests are pretty tight. And next time I go back, I'll definitely mention that. But it's just they don't really know how to breathe properly, because for them it's a war zone. That's all they know.
You can be so. This is why is not breathing connected to anxiety and breathing connected to not having anxiety?
And that's because if you get really constricted, you will become anxious.
Yeah.
And and you'll start to move, and you'll try to get out. That's a deep primordial response.
Yeah.
And so it's hardwired, and it happens within tens of seconds, minute. So constriction can overwhelm anything, and so it's just hardwired to have this